everybody got one of these? Everybody got one of these.
Well, hello everyone. And from the program, I'm Carol DeAngelo, the Sister of Charity of New York. And I have the honor and privilege of these past, I forget now, 4 or 5 years, having the official title, Director of Peace, Justice, and Integrity of Creation for the office of, for that office, for the Sisters of Charity. So that's my official title, but I've kind of done it for many, many years in my other jobs. But I almost said no to being here today. Yeah, I don't know anything about advocacy research. And after I came in late for your presentation and I see the slides, and then see this great PowerPoint, I said, oh gosh, am I on the right track? So you're gonna be helping me. You are gonna be helping me. And I guess I got into this because of, I'm forgetting your name now. But anyway, because when I was asked about it, and I said something, advocacy research, I said, are you going to say this, this, and this? And they said, oh no, those are good questions. Because we all know, and what we've learned, especially these past couple of years, that many times the questions that we ask determine our answers. And the research that we decide to do already kind of determines the outcome. So one of the things I want to really have you think about, and maybe raise with me after we get into this a little bit, is what are the real questions that we need to ask if we're talking about advocacy research? What are the questions that we really need to ask? And so when I went to the internet and said, what does advocacy research mean? You have it in front of you, 2 of those definitions. Take a moment, just take a moment to read that definition. And I want to begin by just having some comments out loud of what you think about those definitions and give me some ideas. But I want this to be grounded. I really want these next 40 minutes to be really grounded. So just take a moment to read this, or maybe you've already gotten a description of it in another place, because I'm going to just ask you to call out some thoughts on advocacy research, or some reaction to these 2 things. Take a moment to think about what you might just pull out. And just what's in bold, those first 2, that first sentence in bold. I showed this actually to Dr. Kristen Moore, who's in the sociology department, because I said, oh, I don't know if I'm on the right track. And one of the things she did that kind of gave me more, if you want to say, confidence in speaking with you is, it's about people's experiences and the information that's needed to help empower the people. So I said, oh, that's one thing I've had in my life these many years, is I've been privileged to journey and hear many, many stories firsthand, and then also to work with people. I don't always do it well. I heard that, I'm sorry, Jim, is it? Or Jim, either in your class or before I came, you do make the point about community organizing. You know, it's not about doing for people. It's about helping them see their gifts, what their needs are, and how can we just be with them to empower them because they can do it. So that's a hard line to work sometimes. So just call out a little bit. What do you think about either those definitions or what you think of as advocacy research? And just say your name so I can just get to know you a little bit. If no one calls, I'll have to call on the interns I have. So you better raise your hand. Any thoughts on the definition or or a question that you have about advocacy research? And you are, tell me your name.
My name is Heather. I'm an IPSL master alum from Portland, Oregon, and just moved off the East Coast. But your definition with the idea of people's experience and this empowerment and all that was something that was very much a part of our master's program, and that was really is how I'd come to define it and see how what we were doing when we were abroad. And then I'm leading one of the round tables, so I Googled these and I came up with these two definitions, and I think that I believe in these two sort of fact checking, especially with the political environment we had and the idea of business and bending these research methods or trying to advance one's own agenda with research. And I never put that with this definition of advocacy research, or I never called it that. So I was really shocked to sort of see that.
Do you agree with those definitions?
I think that exists as a concept, but I have never defined it as advocacy research. To me, I think it's much more a addressing social problems aspect. And it was really interesting.
Because I am kind of asking
this business and political, I think that does exist, that people do use research to advance agendas.
Yeah,
but I have never associated with the term advocacy research, and that's very much on the internet as it defines.
Thank you, because that's an important point, because what do we mean? And how am I going to choose to use advocacy research? That's a very, very good point, because that's an ethical question, right? It's a real ethical question. How am I going to choose? Yes.
I think that's an awful what I said. I agree. I think that advocacy is kind of relative. There's wrong with it, and it depends on the person doing research or looking to support a cause.
So again, values really come in here, right? Ethics come in here. What we hold as personal values and what we live as lived values. So maybe the thought then is that whole idea of empowering people. What does that mean? Because to me, that has something to say about systemic change. And if Dr. or Professor,
Dr.
Aversano were here, what I would say to her, and what I'd love to have a conversation with her, I think one of the challenges that we have in our, even with our elected officials in Congress, I forget the high percentage of people in our Congress who are Catholics. And one of the questions that we, as concerned Catholics, are raising as responsible voters is, where is Catholic social principles in our government agenda? And if you haven't heard about Catholic social principles, you can Google them, because that's not my reason for talking. But one of the things is you can have a good heart and you can give as much money as you want for a cause, but that's not going to change the system. And so there's a difference between giving donations to changing systems. So I guess part of what I want to talk about today is in my many, many years of service, from working with young parents, teenage parents in East Harlem, to working on the earth, to working with prisoners, to working with families and mothers who were dying. I mean, I cannot tell you the many, many people and the kinds of work that I've done. The thing has always been about when you encounter the person and you have the relationship with the person, it is also about the system and the systems of which we're all a part. So when I sat across someone who was a mother who was dying and was asking me what's going to happen to my children after I die, that related to the healthcare system. That related to employment of her husband. That related to so many different things, as well as the personal and the pastoral. So wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I think this whole idea of systemic change is really important. So with that, I think what I just want to say, and then I'll ask if anyone has a burning thing about these two definitions. I think what I was most upset about, but it became very glaring, was it is very interesting how research can be used to shape public opinion, and how accurate is that research. So I'm just not going to say any more on that, but any other big comments on that definition before I continue? All right, so listen, just take a look at these characteristics and skills that I listed that might help the research advocate. So what I'm going to ask you to do in your seat, I'm going to ask you to go through those and maybe ask a question of, why are these important? Why do I think they're important? Why did Carol put them down? And I'd like you to come up with at least each table with at least a comment, an insight, or a question before I give some examples in my own life. Okay? So maybe, I don't know, we'll see if 3 minutes is enough, if it's too much. But I'd like each table to at least have a comment.
This is like not presuming to know everything. You may have knowledge from your academic world.
It's when you have somebody who is very vocal all the time, and they find themselves speaking, they'll take a step back to allow other people to step forward. It's kind of a way to get that democratic process in organizing communities.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I just attended National Lawyers Guild training last weekend, so they were going through, it's fresh in my mind right now, but one of the things when we're working with, I guess, advocacy is making sure organizations are shouting at the top of their lungs, especially in the political climate, where people are rushing into these organizations and they're saying, if you don't just take the mic and advocate, pass the mic. So a lot of the organizations, or my experience working in Riverdale is, if they're having an event and a reporter comes up to you, don't speak. Refer them to or someone, one of the organizers. Just to prevent yourself from entering the space.
That's good.
It's happening a lot now in the organizing communities I've been a part of. And they're mostly people of color, but now there's an instance of one people.
Okay, maybe just another half a minute.
Where there's trauma,
Okay.
there's all this tension going on. But it's very interesting to see, ethics going to another level. Okay, where I thought I was on this level, now you learn 10 more steps to get to a better place. So I always tell people, for me, when I step into a library, that's for me where I'm learning versus other spaces where I'm
All right, just take a moment now. Take a moment just to be quiet and see what you heard each other saying. Maybe, hopefully, more than one person spoke. But what did you hear the person saying? And I'm not asking for detail. Maybe just a sentence, because I just want to get a flavor of what came out. All right, just a flavor of what came out. So if I might ask this table here. Can everyone hear?
Oh, yeah. So I heard Kat say a couple of things that I had not thought of. One was this idea of step up and step back, where, I think the principles here are one of being humble and being sort of open to other views, and that's kind of, some people tend to dominate in a meeting, let's say, and try to get them to step back so other people can speak. And the other thing was this idea of, same kind of idea that, when if you're involved in a heated discussion, particularly now in the political, our political energy is so fraught, to pass the mic and not feel like, so it's the same idea, I guess, of allowing other people to kind of speak. Is that true,
Yeah.
Kat? Yeah.
Just kind of a check on your privilege as an advocate, and allowing other groups, especially when you're advocating for them, if they're present, to pass the mic versus speak for them if they're in the room.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to take this collective wisdom of the group. We're going to see what we're going to do with it. I don't know. I've got to hear from you first, okay?
For us, we kind of, the one that,
Aloud, for me too.
sorry, for us, the one that really popped out was seeking ways to involve those impacted by the issue you're advocating for. We kind of thought that if the person could give their account, or kind of we could show them how to empower themselves, that it would just kind of give that much more fruition to what you're advocating for.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And loud.
Yes, so we were discussing it, and I think what we walked away with is that you need to first go in and really just gain that understanding. So there's a lot of steps in these first couple bullet points, walking the footsteps and knowing the culture and hearing their stories. It helps bring you to this greater perspective of the understanding, shared understanding, and it also can then help to use whatever you need as sort of support through your research to make sure that you're achieving the needs that they want, that will be empowering to them, and then letting them guide their research.
Thank you. Thank you. How's that here?
I forgot the lady who was sitting with us, but we were speaking about how we thought that walking in other people's footsteps and being curious and being open to hearing what people have to say is very important. The first thing that popped into my mind when reading these listed skills and characteristics was a social worker. I think a social worker should embody all of these characteristics to do their job.
Thank you. Okay, here.
Something that, sorry, I forgot to say.
And loud.
Something that Sandra had mentioned was assimilation, especially when she was doing research in South Africa. And I think also this encompasses like a gentle courage, because you're courageous to stand up, but you're also courageous to step back and let somebody else speak, so that patient and courageous, so that you can fully hear what the issue is before trying to advocate on behalf of somebody and having them advocate on behalf of themselves.
Let's take what each group said, because each group is bringing a unique aspect to it. And that's one of the things that I just want to kind of say now as I think of it is, no one person can be all and can have all the criteria and can do it. So that's why the collaboration is so important, and I'll say more about that. But when I think of research advocacy, because we are talking about these qualities, but we can't forget the real research that has to take place, that you have to have facts for to convince people, especially when you're trying to get funding, the scholarly research. But it's all of a piece. So how do we keep it all, make it integrated? All right, so this group.
We kind of talked about the meet people where they're at a lot. We just kind of connected to it. Like I mentioned social work, my sister is in a master's program for that right now. And like I went to a Jesuit school, so it reminded me of the Men and Women Forum with others. Victoria was with Habitat for Humanity, so it reminded her of like hand up, not hand out. And advocacy, she worked with children in the DR and like AmeriCorps, and we've all done stuff like this, so I think each of us connected to that one, particularly in different ways.
So do you, since you gave very specific places you volunteered, did you consider yourself at that time as a research advocate, or because you talk about it now, would you consider yourself as a research advocate?
I would say an advocate, but not necessarily a research advocate. Because research wasn't technically a part of it, but in a way, like you can always pull research from past experiences. But if you're looking at research in the fact of like hard data points, no. But we've all kind of used our experiences as research
talks about, we don't know where we'll be, especially you young people, a few years from now. And what the letter talks about, which I thought was really very good, that it's promoting research as a form of advocacy work and scientific literacy to the larger Riverdale, New York area community. So that's a great idea. But I saw in here something about, let me see, a critical discussion about research ethics, service, and scientific inquiry in the age of alternative facts. And so one of the things that I'd like to invite you to, no matter where you find yourself, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, in your professional career, is you might not be doing the scientific research or the analytical research, but who are you collaborating with that is going to give you that information? And how do you partner with those groups? How do you partner with those groups with whatever you're doing? So maybe I'm going to give you now some examples of how I see this as very important. I really am a practitioner. I consider myself a practitioner and an on-grounds person, although I try to facilitate a lot of groups and a lot of people. But as you can see from this paper, immigration is an issue that I have to work on. Believe me, I cannot go through all the proposed laws or the proposed regulations to find out what is feasible, what is more just, what is going to be good. So it's very interesting how my connections will go from groups, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and Network Lobby, which is also a national group, that have people that visit Congress, that meet with our legislators, that study the bills, that study policy, that will look at all the ins and outs, and they're the ones that give us the information. They're the ones that went through the executive orders that have recently come out to tell us where some of the pros and the cons around that. But at the same time, they are also the groups that are saying to us, Carol, you are working on the ground. You know the people. We need to hear stories from you. You need to put us in touch with people who are experiencing these things so that we can then share that information with the legislators. So it's very interesting, and I have to say, more and more in this political climate, we're talking about how do we make that connection? And part of that is we make that connection because you also then have to join with groups that do the scientific research in terms of, if we're talking about immigration and this recent executive order, and I didn't bring facts with me, but if you know them, how many people who have come, refugees who have come from the countries that are on the list to be excluded, have been arrested for crimes? None. None. How much money do undocumented immigrants bring into our nation and contribute?
Billions.
Billions, right. How much, in terms of our Medicaid system and Medicare system, that is, or especially the Medicare system, we're talking about it. So many, the Social Security system, many, and again, it's in the billions of money contributed to by undocumented workers because they pay into it. They pay into the system. So there's a lot of false information out there in terms of how undocumented are taking away the jobs. Now, it's very hard to convince people that it's different, even when they get to know some undocumented and they meet them face to face. But even when you present people with facts, it's really very challenging. So one of the things that I'm struggling with in terms of advocacy research now, and a question that I have is, there is a lot of misinformation going out, and how do we, through those of us that are on the field, we're trying to work harder with national groups and regional groups and certainly global groups to get better information out. But that's why I kind of said yes to this, because I really think that this advocacy research is a real key area right now. Let me just stop. I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to mention a few other situations. But what questions does this raise up for you? Is it helpful? Does it make you understand it better? Yes. And you are, sorry, your name?
Vinda from
Vinda.
College. I have a question about how do you do advocacy or research when the people that you're speaking to are undocumented, for instance? Like how do you get figures and are they projections?
You mean get projections in terms of what they're going through, their experience, or economically?
Economically, because I guess if they're undocumented, like how do you know specifically how much they're contributing to Social Security, or how much their employer is contributing on their behalf? Because I know oftentimes employers try to fudge the number, pull back.
Yeah, I can't give you the exact way they do that, how the government does that. But one thing that when one works with an undocumented, you always advise them they cannot get a Social Security card legally. And that's unfortunately one of the things that if they have a Social Security card, it is illegal. And that's considered, an offense. But what you encourage them to do, and so we've held, when I say we, because we work with many groups, have held meetings with the migrant workers. And I don't know if it's the Department of Labor, because you have to remember New York State is a very friendly state. So we can do things in New York State with the police, in certain parts of New York State with the police, but with the New York State. So you encourage them to have a TIN number, and they can register with the New York State Department of Labor, I think it is, but I don't know the exact thing. And so that helps show how much money is taken out of their check, each paycheck. So there are things that happen with people who are undocumented in terms of money taken out of their paychecks. And that is, there might be other ways, but many people don't realize that with undocumented that happens. Yeah.
What's the advantage to them for the TIN number? What's the advantage?
Well, before this current climate, they were always encouraged to do it because then they could show that they were being responsible people in the United States, not just off the, taking, but that they were giving too. Yeah. So, raise a hand if you have a question, but with this, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, because we're talking about systemic change. We're not talking about, we're talking about empowering people. We're talking about changing systems and making them more just. And so one of the things that happens, even with immigration now, is how do you do the advocacy and the research to show that these systems are unjust? That is a big question. And we work with a group, New Sanctuary Coalition NYC. And I'm going to mention Robbie Ragbir's name. Robbie Ragbir, if you Googled him, you'd get him up. He was interviewed a few weeks ago by Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! And they have really made his case very public. And we have been encouraging our sisters and associates and colleagues to write letters in his defense because he committed a crime many years ago. And one of the things, when you go to and read his timeline, since he's been in the United States, his crime is not clear cut. It's a very interesting thing. So we hear about how we are going to deport anyone who's a criminal. And so we have Robbie, who now for many, many years has been a great advocate, community organizer, especially for undocumented. He's the executive director of Miss Sanctuary Coalition NYC. He's got a lot of city councilmen and women supporting him, legislators supporting him. Certainly hundreds and hundreds met when he went to his one of his hearings about a month ago. He will be going back again April 11th, I think. But very interestingly, he was working for a small company as a salesman, and someone came to him, I think, who was asking for a loan. It was someone who gave false ID, and it's too complicated for me to go through. But with this false ID, the check bounced, and he was charged with fraud. All right? And then it goes on and on to show some of the intricacies of this. Whether or not he should get a presidential pardon, he did serve some time, blah, blah. And you begin to realize when you read this, I couldn't even understand the legal complexities of the situation. But this is someone who will be deported. So I thought, let me raise that small story of Robbie. Because when we talk about research advocacy, and if we're talking about sending criminals back, and if you read about some of the criminals that we're sending back, is that the kind of criminal that needs to be sent back? Are we really talking about those who are dangerous criminals? So I thought I'd raise that because me and my work in educating and telling other people, the question becomes, right, how do we inform people? How do we inform people? What is the truth? How do we encourage them to participate, to take action, and kind of believe that they can change a system just by their own advocacy research of reading material which they can trust? And I guess that gets back to what kind of material do we trust? What groups do we trust? So let me just stop there for a second. Questions? Is this what you would consider advocacy research? I don't know. Yes.
Well, I really loved on your sheet what drew out when you're looking back at the characteristics and skills, and I know you guys kind of chatted about this already, but you write here stories, and you just mentioned the story of Robbie, and how that can be a motivating force for change. And what is research but just analyzing a story of someone's lived experience, using data or facts to provide a grounding for that story. But at the heart of it, it still is somebody's experience. And I just thought that was really, really powerful when you were talking about that, because I'm from Portland, Oregon, and just yesterday, actually 2 days ago, ICE came to the home of a Mexican immigrant who was actually a dreamer. So he had been pardoned under Obama's Dreamer Act. And they arrested him. He had had a DUI in the past, and he had done everything to get it removed and deal with it. But basically, as soon as this story came to light, the community rallied around him, and they did a protest down at the ICE detention center downtown, and he was immediately released. So just, that's those kinds of impactful stories about how we can use data around immigration statistics, use data around, people's stories to get to have change, I think is kind of what you're getting at.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for making it real.
Yeah.
So listen, with the few minutes I have, I'm going to ask you some questions. How many are from the New York area? Here. I know our IPSL. Okay. So this is in particular to you, all right? But it's to everyone, because we're sitting in this room now, and some of you are not from the New York area, but you're living here, all right? What's going to move you what kind of advocacy research what I need to do, or my colleagues need to do, to move you to be concerned about the Algonquin pipeline that's being put under Indian Point? Have you heard about that? You've heard about that. And because there's been a lot of start, stops, one of the things I think they're thinking of doing now is because they either can't get permission or they couldn't go through rock, it's actually going to go under Indian Point. Now we do know Indian Point is going to close. I am not going to go into that issue, and I don't know if I have it there. Indian Point Safe Energy Coalition is a group of concerned citizens who have been fighting for years with Riverkeeper that has provided a lot of the legal work, and many, many other groups, Sierra Lower Hudson group. These people have worked unbelievably to get out the facts, But even with that, the facts don't get out, all right? But we know Indian Point's closing. Now part of the information that has to get out now is, do people understand the danger of the rods, the radioactive material that cannot be moved, that will be staying in Indian Point indefinitely? Because the rods, and there's dry cask and wet and all that, I mean, unbelievable. So in terms of not getting into Indian Point as Indian Point, I'm getting into that pipeline. Advocacy research, what would move you to read more about that? Because that's part of the first step. Just give me some help, yes.
How will this affect my water? I live in the Bronx. That would be one thing.
Okay, how would it affect your work? Okay,
My drinking water.
yes?
Oh, no, I was saying water. He said, how would it
Okay.
affect the water? And I think same thing, like, how would this affect our drinking water in this area?
All right.
It's huge.
So would you read about that to find out? Just by way of information, it affects more the drinking water of the people in the area, because our drinking water here comes from the Catskills, all right? So we're part of the reservoir. However, there is contamination, and this is how it might affect us. I just thought of this. This is how it might affect us. And I'm not too sure if it's because of Indian Point, but I think it's the department, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. I think it's EPA, which we know is having its struggles right now. So I think it's EPA that would be the one that would do this. But we now have some regulation that says a certain percentage of radiation can exist in our water. There is a movement to increase that number, to allow more in our water. And one of the reasons why that, and it'll still be safe, by the way. That's what we'll tell. It's still safe if that regulation is closed. Now, why we're doing that is because we are finding out that with all the fracking, especially, and of course you have the chemicals that was mentioned in so many chemicals are going into our drinking water and our waterways. But especially with the fracking, what do we do with the wastes? Because some of that waste is radioactive waste. And although we are assured that there is no danger, what we do know is that our waste management facilities, you can treat water with certain bacteria in it and things, but it is not built to treat problems with radioactive material. So we really have a problem with that in our country. We also have a problem, but New York State was really, and where is this related to advocacy research? Because the people rose up. New York, EPA said they had never gotten so many comments against fracking with anything else. They were just so amazed. They had usually very few comments come when they have hearings, but people sent in so many comments, so that did help getting fracking banned. But the other thing that was passed from municipality to municipality is when the pools of wastewater go into, think of your garbage lining things, and the water's in there, and the sun is supposed to dry up the water, and you have salt fragments. That was being sold as de-icing on the to municipalities to when it snowed, and so not every municipality, but municipality after municipality in upper, at least I know the Westchester County area, Putnam and all that, I don't know about New York City, said we're not going to buy that kind of desalter. But then the problem came, you have to follow the supply chain to see where it comes. But again, the research advocacy, so I guess this is the point that I'm going to end on. That story that I gave you, and I talk about Rockland Water Coalition, and you asked about our drinking water. One of the things that's happening, and I didn't think about it as research advocacy until I was asked to do this, is if you went to the website I have listed there, this group has been one of the most powerful groups that I've known that was able to stop, at that time it was United Water in Rockland County, from building a desalination plant. They mobilized the citizens. The people that came out to the hearing just poured out into the streets, even if they got larger forums to hold them in. But one of the things that this was the challenge, they had to find money to bring in research experts, because the research people that were connected to universities in this area would not go to testify because they were afraid of losing their jobs because of the funding. So they had, I think $900,000 was quoted what they were trying to raise. But this citizens group got enough, and I won't go into the history, to stop United from building this desalination plant because they showed how it's not really needed. And now what they're doing, it stayed for a couple of years, meaning stayed until a certain amount of years has to go by, until the new subsidiary, which is Suez, might be United Suez, can reapply for a desalination plant. But for those of you who have ever heard about Suez years ago, 10 years ago, it came out in terms of its business plan to say, we're going to make a profit out of water. We're going to make a profit out of water. And that then becomes as is water a right. But what this group of citizens is doing now is trying to work with the state to form a subsidiary which will be citizen-owned, so that water will be controlled in Rockland County by the citizens. And that's because of research advocacy of the citizens. So again, I just leave you with, you have power, not just in terms of the people you're serving, but as we move forward as a country, we need to be empowered in terms of being responsible citizens. Because so much is happening. So much is being threatened now. So how will we use our skills, our gifts, in terms of research advocacy to make America great? Great.